the Pet Health and Happiness podcast from Bella+Duke, keeping you at the cutting edge of pet nutrition, behaviour and health with expert interviews, mythbusters and more to help your pet lead a healthier, happier life.
Hi everybody and welcome to this week's episode. My name is Rowan Sanderson and I'm the CNO, Chief Nutritional Officer here at Bella+Duke. And I'm with my good friend and President of the RFVS, Raw Feeding Veterinary Society, Dr. Brendan Clark. And this week, we're going to talk about probiotics. Dr. Brendan, welcome.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I was great, thank you. Always good to see you, Brendan.
Yeah, looking forward to today.
Me too. Probiotics is a hot topic right now. And frankly, there's a lot of myth and confusion out there. And sometimes I think it confuses people from the actual really exciting data and benefits of probiotics. So I think let's shine some light into this subject.
Yeah, I think from a veterinary point of view, there's sort of developments that are going on. I know that you've got a lot of experience from a human aspect as well, and Bella+Duke are doing some really exciting stuff with a new launch, and I'm really interested to ask you a few questions as to you and Bella+Duke's view of what you feel probiotics are for dogs. Let's turn the tables and
let's put me on the spot. Okay, well, that's a really good question. And it's a good place to start. What are probiotics? Probiotics are anything that promote beneficial bacteria in the intestinal tract, so in the microbiome. Now, this can be in the form of a probiotic pill. It can be in the form of probiotic foods, such as sauerkraut, as kefir, or other fermented products, which are rich in beneficial bacteria for the host.
Okay, and so why are these different necessarily for dogs than what you would have used for your human patients?
Now that's a really good question. Well, these probiotics, they're called FidoSpore. They're different in a couple of ways. One is in the probiotic itself, and two is in the fact that it's specifically for dogs. So let's drill down into that. Firstly, FidoSpore is the world's first, as far as I'm aware, very exciting, canine and feline-specific probiotic, which means it's been clinically researched on both cats and dogs to show that it brings certain benefits, which we can discuss later. But if you were to actually look at the product itself, apart from the fact it's canine and feline specific, why is it different? Well, number one is that it's the first time these three specific strains of bacteria have ever been used together. Number two is it's actually in spore form. So what does that mean? When bacteria is stressed, it becomes sporulated. And if we imagine that as a little suit of armor, which it puts on to protect itself and to stop itself being destroyed by things like stomach acid or the environment or harsh conditions. Now, and the third thing is that these particular strains act as something called universal colonizers. So if we go back to sporulated, we can explain what that is, and then we'll talk about universal colonizers. Does that make sense so far?
Okay, so we talk about the differences there. You've talked about specifically the FidoSpore, which is great development as far as we can all see. Do you want to explain where we've been at with, using fermented veg? Lots of people out there maybe watching this having seen, been using sauerkraut and kimchi, or they may have been, using kefir, goat's milk fermented, things like that. How do you feel that this is an advance, and what do you think were the downsides to using those forms of probiotic that we've been advocating up to this time?
Oh, wow. Now that's a really gold question or golden question. So I'm a big fan of all of those, to be honest. I'm a big fan of everything that you've mentioned, and I've seen that there've been multiple benefits both in the canine, the feline, and the human population. Okay. However, why do I see a probiotic as an advance? One is we know exactly what strains are in the mix. Now, even if you go to your local store and you buy a kombucha or you make your own kefir, and if you go to the extent that you and I go to, Brendan, of sourcing raw goat's milk, but putting in, a mother colony to actually populate the bacteria, as much as we see great benefits from it and we really enjoy doing it, we don't know exactly what bacteria is in there. Now, we know net is positive, but with a FidoSpore probiotic, what we do know is we're getting 3 specific strains which have been demonstrably proven to benefit cats and dogs. So there's zero worries about other things or what it might contain, or if you've left it out on the shelf, has it fermented a little bit more? So that's the first part. And the second part is that some of these foods are containing probiotics, such as sauerkraut in particular, can, in a really small and very sick population of dogs, promote quite a histamine reaction or contribute to raising levels of histamine. So this is really, really important when you think about dogs with itchy skin, which might be having a histamine reaction. In a small percentage of the population, the fermented foods that you're using could actually be contributing to that situation rather than taking away from it. And this is always a case of everything's a tool in the toolbox, but when do you use it and how do you use it?
Yeah, great. I think from that point of view, I've experienced both sides to probiotics, the massive improvements you can get with patients, and actually those people will call them a detox or a healing crisis, and I think ultimately it's actually we're just using something that's inappropriate for that animal at that time. They need to be helped through that stage, and there's other things that sometimes need to be added. So it's I think you're right. This whole net thing of actually, in the great scheme of things, absolutely they create an improvement with the patient, but you've just got to be making sure that you're not accidentally creating something that's slightly more toxic or has introduced a bacterium that you don't want in there, one of the Clostridias or something like that, because that could cause some problems.
And also, sorry, Brendan, for dogs which, for instance, have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, sometimes throwing a nuclear bomb of many bacteria in there can, of course, make the situation worse in the short term. When you titrate and you control and actually very precisely put in specific bacteria which will target non-beneficial bacteria or re-establish a healthy balance, that's often an easier way to go before you revert to fermented foods later on, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about probiotics and the phytospore. Can you give me a little bit more information about what it is that's special? What's this sporulation? Because I think lots of my clients are really confused about why we're feeding bacteria and the acid of the stomach should take it out. So tell me what the special thing about sporulation is.
Oh, wow. This is absolutely golden. You're going to like this. So sporulation simply means that the bacteria is in spore form. So the next question is, well, why is that beneficial? So when bacteria have been stressed or they go into hibernation or dormant form, what they do is they put, if you imagine a kind of Harry Potter cloak around them, and it's a spore. Now, interestingly, there have been bacteria found in glacier which are over 2 million years old and are still viable when brought back to temperature. So it's a really effective form of staying safe. Now, why does that benefit us, the humans, or your dogs and cats? Because quite often, probiotics that people take end up either being killed or in the stomach by stomach acid, or they don't get to the right place, or they're simply excreted. So this ties two things together. Basically, the fact that one, when you eat bacteria in spore form, it goes into the mouth. Let's imagine it's going into your dog's mouth and there's a temperature change. And then it goes into the stomach. And there's all those beautiful gastric juices, all those stomach acids, and the bacteria sense that. And then it gets into the small intestine and it sees the other excretions, which are coming in, like from the bile, all of these components. And what it's called is it's a molecular handshake, which says to the bacteria, you're home, you're safe, this is a good host, and you're in the right place. So the bacteria take off the spore and they populate. Now that's really important. You're getting viable bacteria in the right place.
Great, and that's really impressive that we've got to that point where we're creating bacteria that can find their way to their homes that they should be in. And we've also talked a little bit earlier with regards to the differences of using kimchi and sauerkraut and the multiplicity of bacteria that you can sometimes get in those probiotic sort of mixes with vegetable matter. What's special about these universal populators, you've called them? These.
Yeah, totally. Well, universal colonizers or populators, basically what they do is they act for the benefit of the host. And actually, when I interviewed Karan Krishnan, who's the chief science officer at the head at Microbiome Labs, he actually said to me, he goes, if somebody had given me $100 million to research this, I wouldn't have been able to recreate what Mother Nature does, which is kind of humbling. It's only recently been observed. And what they do is they get into the small intestine, they reveal themselves, they remove the spores. And then what they do is they take a look around, they do something called quorum sensing, and they see which strains are present, which are a threat to the host, to the community, and which strains are present, which are a benefit to the community. And what they do is they act on behalf of the whole community of bacteria within the host. So they'll say, wow, imagine it's like a decorator that's come in and said, wow, those curtains really clash. Actually, what they're saying is, look, these are dangerous species. They surround them, they take nutrients away from them, and they starve them out. Then they take those nutrients and they give them to beneficial strains. So the host as a whole feels better, and the community inside the host is a more beneficial community. So it's absolutely humbling to think about that you can put in bacteria which don't simply feed themselves, they will actively go out and target bad bacteria. And I use the term bad bacteria, but we might call them pathogenic. Or we might even say bacteria which are present, which could be good, but there's just too many of them. What they do is they recalibrate the whole community of bacteria in the host's gut.
Yeah, and that's something that we use a lot of, this whole theory of microbiome and the symbiosis, the working together with the host to improve health. And I think that's a really good aspect of understanding what the microbiome is about. As for too long, we as a human population have just gone, bacteria are bad, and there is no such thing. We've evolved together over millions of years to as living organisms, to have these hosts of little microorganisms working alongside us for the mutual benefit. So I think it's...
Brendan, I know you and I are super aligned on this, and it's one of our kind of passion projects. When you consider that 99% of your genetic material within your body is not your own, it's foreign material. To actually say something like bacteria are bad or good is bewildering. You can influence your health, your longevity, your mood, the way you eat, your energy levels, your organ health, simply through the signaling from bacteria. I mean, it's incredible.
So I'm going to move on to another topic here, another
Okay.
micro topic within the microbiome. Okay, so...
I like what you've done there.
So for me as a vet, I came across some research looking complementary medicine wise with regards to the microbiome. So over 100 years ago, there were a couple of scientists who were looking at bacteria in illness and cultural bacteria at those times, just what they could culture from the gut, and identifying certain diseases, producing certain gut flora that they could culture, and how they could sometimes feed those back to help those ill patients. How do you see FidoSpore working? What sort of conditions do you feel that would be appropriate for us to be saying to dog owners, this should really help your dog?
Oh, great question. Now, I have to caveat this, as in this is not intended as medical advice. However, the research suggests, and actually we've been trialing it within our group and within the company, and these are the following conditions that we've seen huge improvements on. So, itchy skin, red or inflamed skin, ear problems, those were the really obvious, really quick wins for this probiotic. So, and one thing that was interesting is that we trialed it with one person who was raw feeding the dog and one person who was, for various reasons, currently feeding their dog on processed food. And wow, the raw fed dog showed recovery in 24 to 36 hours. And this isn't a small patch. This is a dog which had had these problems for 3 to 4 years, and they've tried everything from steroids to skin creams to the whole smorgasbord. So when you look at what's being spent on medication there and the amount of distress for the dog, there was, in this particular case, a radical change in 24 hours. And we have before and after pictures, actually, which we will post in a link here. The other person started to see a notable difference in their animal, but it was taking more a week to 10 days. So itchy skin, to answer your question, itchy skin, those kind of psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, all that family of symptoms. The other area is any kind of digestive relief, which is an obvious thing, digestive problems. So whether it's an IBS or a Crohn's style or it's chronic diarrhea. And that's another thing that somebody else, when we personally trialed it in our company, said that cleared up very quickly. So that's another thing. Now, some of the less obvious areas were energy levels within the dog. But if we think about that, that makes sense as well, because if the dog has any digestive issues, it's having problems assimilating, not simply digesting, but assimilating the nutrients. And it might also be having problems because of that, making various vitamins, such as the B vitamins. So there may be a deficiency in vitamins and essential nutrients, which this could help with.
So it's really interesting because also there's lots of information out there on the human aspects of their mental health and mental well-being, and it's a big subject these days. Everybody's talking about mental well-being, mindfulness, and that side of things. And I would say that there's a huge area for anybody who's got issues with dogs, with behavioral concerns, etc., to consider sometimes that interaction, that symbiosis, is also really important. So it's not just going to be about what can you give for the brain.
Brendan, I'm so happy you brought that up. This is a really good point. I was actually going to avoid going there, but there's been certainly correlation in the human field between, everybody's now heard of leaky gut, which is where the gut basically gets intestinal permeability, where there's spaces in the gut. They lose their integrity, and it means whole protein molecules can go through into the bloodstream, but also bacteria in the gut can go into the bloodstream. Good or bad, it goes in and creates inflammation because it's wrapped up in something called an LPS wrapper, lipopolysaccharide. Now, that's also shown to create something called leaky brain. The inflammation creates leaky brain, which is associated and correlated with depression, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, memory loss, basically brain fog. And if you're getting brain fog symptoms, there's a high chance that you've got leaky brain.
We've talked about the benefits and about the incredible bacteria, the 3 strains that are in this particular FidoSpore. Do you foresee any side effects of using probiotics? Do you think that that's going to be an issue for patients to be aware of, for clients to be looking out for?
Oh, golly, yeah. When we look at the amount of bacteria that are in both ours and our dogs' and cats' bodies, there are side effects. Now, largely, they're very manageable and very tolerable. In a few extreme cases, you may find that your dog has a change in bowel habits, in toilet habits, consistency for a few days. Now, whilst this isn't intended as medical advice, we always advise starting slowly with these. That's called titrating up, and maybe just start with half one of the snacks, the probiotic snacks. So you start with half every other day. This is particularly relevant for puppies. It's suitable for all sizes and all ages of dogs. But if you want to come at this cautiously, or you've got a dog with really severe symptoms or that's reacted in the past, start with half a tab of this snack. It's in a defatted beef liver. And just to be clear, we've seen benefits on dogs even that have quite severe allergies to beef, which is just amazing. So far, it seems to be really benefiting every dog. Now, start with half a tab. If you've got any concerns or any issues, you can do that every other day. And then the next week, do half a tab every day. And then the next week, start doing 1 tab, then half a tab, 1 tab, then half a tab. And you can titrate it up as slowly as that. Or if your dog is not exhibiting any reaction, after a couple of days, you can just start with 1 every day. Health is not a competition, it's consistency. And this will help you, can seriously help you get there. But there's going to be a huge change in the population of bacteria for the better. And that can lead to some gastric issues in the short term. And one of the other symptoms was one dog, because bacteria was being killed by the beneficial bacteria, smelt very meaty for a few days. And this went away. So there could be some skin odors, there might be change. And if you're not sure, please consult with your vet.
I think those are really good sort of bits to look out for. Sometimes those odor changes, people get quite worried about, and I think looking out for those, and then just keeping in touch with your health professional just to say that this is happening. Are there any other reasons why those smells are changing? And it may well be that you just have to work that through, which sort of leads me on to, for these changes that you've seen in the cohort of animals that you've been using on already, how quickly do you see these changes occurring? Is it next day? Is it a week? Is it a month?
Well, that really depends. That's a great question. It depends on a couple of kind of competing factors or contributing factors. Is the age of the dog, how long they might have been fed on processed food, how long they've had these symptoms, to what degree they have the symptoms, do they have any other health issues? So it's a really moving landscape. But to answer the question, we've seen changes in as little as 24 hours. We were contacted by one person who said, how soon are we expecting to see changes? And I actually thought, oh my goodness, is it not working? And they said, well, no, there's been a transformation overnight in the redness in the paws. I mean, I can't convey my excitement when I heard that. Other dogs, which were a bit older and had more serious issues and were actually being fed on processed food, took 7 to 10 days to start showing changes. Try to avoid making other changes. Start a little diary. Note any symptoms, because then if you actually want to speak with your practitioner, you can give them some facts. Day 3, smell change. Day 4, smell change gone. So what's really happening here is we're seeing a die-off of pathogenic bacteria and a population of the more positive, beneficial bacteria. So, of course, there's going to be a big change going on in there. And that might lead to diarrhea. It might lead to stools suddenly firming up as the bacteria creating the diarrhea are suddenly wiped out. So it could really manifest in many ways. The key is stay calm, start slowly if you've got any concerns, stay in contact with your vet, and please note down what you're doing. Now, if you start slowly, that packet of 30 could actually last you 6-7 weeks, by which time, as long as you've addressed other areas in the diet, you should be seeing a radical difference.
How long do you feel that you'll continue? How long do you feel that those patients should continue to take FidoSpore? Is it just a one-pot wonder, or is it something that they should really be considering to be on for the rest of their lives?
Oh, wow. I mean, this is a really golden question. And it's one that can't be answered specifically because it depends exactly what that dog has. And more importantly, what environment the dog is in. So, for instance, if the dog is swimming in a really dirty, bacteria-laden river every day of its life, then frankly, you're probably going to need the probiotics every day of its life. However, that's an extreme case. What the lab has indicated is that they envisage one treatment should be sufficient for 90% of the population and even more. And then, as a preventative dose, you could go on to 1 every other day, and then even as little as 1 every 3rd day. So the investment compared to what you could be spending is actually relatively little, whereas the health gains are relatively huge. Literally, 1 pot should address most of the issues you're trying to address with the probiotics. And then a maintenance dose will prevent reoccurrence, in theory. Now, we're really keen to hear back from people on this. We'd love to see some before and after pictures. And what we'd really like to do is get feedback so that we can liaise with the lab and help them and us all improve and grow together.
So, we've got some great information on FidoSpore and Bella+Duke's launch. How do clients actually come forth and order this product from you guys?
Oh, this is great stuff. So it's going to be available through a practitioner network in the UK. And I believe you are going to be one of those people, Brendan. If you're an existing Bella+Duke customer and you wish to buy it, it can be simply added to your food delivery. As simple as that.
And so they just click on the button that says FidoSpore and
exactly.
pops in.
Yep, that's it. As simple as that.
So I've got quite a few clients that get confused over this next point, and that is with regards to the difference of pre and probiotics. Do you want to just jump in and explain a little bit about what the difference is, why you would use one over the other?
Oh, wow. Okay. Really simple. I always like to use the analogy. Imagine that probiotics or the biotic part, the flora, are beautiful flowers that you're growing in your intestinal garden. The prebiotics are simply the soil or the substrate on which you grow them. So like everything on the planet, it needs food to survive. This is how you nourish the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Probiotics are the bacteria, prebiotics are the food that nourish and help grow them.
And what's out there? Because we talk about this big long word, oligosaccharides, okay, and they're, it's a food for those bacteria. But I know that you're looking at some of the little tweaks, the nuances to what you can change about the things that go alongside those to feed those bacteria, to act as that substrate, as you called it. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. We've seen and studies indicate that you can hugely influence the type of bacteria you grow and the quantity by changing the foods which you feed yourself, which aren't actually to nourish your body, but more to nourish their bodies. So, for instance, we've seen a specific longevity bacteria which is promoted by a very tiny amount of olive oil. And that's the key, okay? That it's, dosage is key, which is why we started adding a very small amount of olive oil to our food to help grow these beneficial bacteria in the dogs. Now, these bacteria have been seen in blue zones around the world. If anybody's interested, I'm sure you're all interesting, but at least hopefully more than Brendan and I. They're called Akkermansia mucifila, and basically this means they love mucus and they produce it in your gut to create a really strong wall to protect you against viruses, obviously very topical, and to stop and help prevent food intolerances. So basically, if you look at your intestine, like a really, really beautiful thin castle wall, the mucus on the outside acts like a bit of a moat to prevent those bacteria that you don't want even reaching the wall.